Hi everyone, today I'm combining the beauty of applique with the timeless art of Sashiko stitching to create 2 quilt blocks for my ombre quilt. I really like the Sashiko and applique combination. For this block we're doing something a little bit different because I've sewn 2 blocks together here, and these are blocks from rows 3 and 4. And the pattern I'm going to do is going to cross these 2 blocks. It's still going to be circular. So I've sewn those together and I'll just put that aside for the moment. What I'm going to do is a chrysanthemum. So I'm going to draw around this plate, which looks to be just about the right size, and I'm just going to draw a simple circle and cut that out. And this is a heat iron off pen, but it wouldn't matter because this is just a cut line anyway. Okay, so just lift that up and see if that's, yep, I can see that just fine. So I'm going to cut this circle out now. Curves are not always the easiest things to cut. I do actually have a special cutter that cuts circles for me, but I'm showing this way because I figure everybody doesn't have one of those. Now the next thing is put some fusible on the back. If you choose to use something like the Heat and Bond or one of the ones that's got a paper back in, it'll be easier for you just to draw the circle on the paper and then cut it out. I'm just going to use the Misty Fuse webbing for this. So the next thing I'm going to do now is center this. I'll just do that by fold it in half and marking the edges and line it up on this piece centrally. So I'm going to fuse that down and then we'll do the next step from there. I've fused my circle onto my 2 blocks of my quilt, and I'm going to draw this flower pattern. I was aiming for a chrysanthemum style, but I just hand drew this, mostly by folding the paper into quarters and marking the lines, and then just putting little curves on the edges. Let me just give you a still picture in case you want to use my image in some way. Once I did that, I took a photocopy of it and then I cut out the edge. Now if this was a dark fabric, I would have put a carbon, the white carbon or transfer sheet under it, and then placed this on and drawn over the lines, but I don't think the white carbon will show enough on this particular fabric colour. So I've cut out the shape around the petals and I'm going to line this up. I've lined the centre with the seam and I've just cut out half of the design, and I'm just going to draw around the edges. And these may not be perfect curves, but as I sew I'll just adjust a little bit so that they look the way they're supposed to. So let me just turn that around, line it up again with the seam and just draw in the other half. Okay, so there's a kind of a rough chrysanthemum drawn on there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is cut into the centre, and I'm going to cut out this smaller half. And then I'm just going to follow the same process. So I'll just cut that out, lay it on there and draw it just the same way. I just quickly need to secure this edge. Probably I'm going to use my applique stitch on this machine. So I've got some matching thread on the top. So that's all secured on there now. And we can move on to the next step, the fun step, which is the Sashiko. Going to do some Sashiko here now. Get my Sashiko needle. Now I was going to use white on this, but on the pale blue the white's really not going to show up very much. So on the light blue colours on this quilt I'm going to use a darker blue thread. So I have some leftover thread from another project that I use and I really like this. So I'm going to use this. This is Hobby Wrap Sashiko thread, and it's a good one. I like the variegated colours in here as well. I'm sure I'll have enough left over there for doing what I want to do on this project. Okay, Sashiko thimble. I'm starting with a knot because again this is the back of a quilt, it's not going to show. And around the centre here I have a little circle, so I'm just going to start and do that centre first. So obviously on centres you tend to want to do a little bit smaller stitching because the curve makes it difficult to get a good centre if you don't. So I may only do a couple of stitches at a time here. Also because I'm putting my needle through 2 layers of fabric and the fusible that I used. That'll mean now that I have to do just a few less stitches than usual as well. But you know, that's what happens on these projects. You have to adapt according to the circumstances. Now here is where the seam is, where I sewed the 2 blocks together, so just doing 1 stitch there. Might still be a bit hard to pull through. No, it was okay. And this pink will iron off when I've finished doing the Sashiko. I'll iron it and get rid of it all so it won't show at all. Usually when I'm marking on something like this, I tend to do a similar colour. So in this case, I would normally have done a blue pen. All the blue pens are a dark enough shade where it would have shown against the blue fabric. But my blue pen had gone dry. I need to get a new supply of these iron-off pens, so I've got a choice of colours, down to just a couple of colour choices at the moment. So. But I'm really not worried about this showing at the end. I've just never had a problem with that. I just mention it because I know other people, I've heard other people say that it's possible. It's an acknowledged issue with these pens, so you can't just ignore it. This is my seam section again. I hope I don't have one of these lines totally sitting on that. That'll be a slow row to do. But if I do, I do. We'll manage. So I'm back to the beginning. So now I'm going to move on and I'm going to do the inner circle of flowers, and I'm just going to go around one by one. On the original piece of borrowed fabric that I liked so much, that really inspired me to do this quilt, there are 3 applique sections using the same pattern. And I didn't use the applique that they have put on there. I just didn't like the particular symbol that they used. I'm not sure what it was supposed to be. It may be a Japanese symbol that I just don't understand. So I looked around for something that I thought I would enjoy. This did cross 2 blocks in the same way that this flower is doing, so that's why I'm putting this over 2 blocks. But I'm just using a different pattern. I just drew a different pattern. And I don't want to do 3 identical ones like this, but I want to do 3 that connect in some way. I'm thinking about it while I'm sewing this. So I'm just going to continue, and I'm going to sew around all these petals with this Sashiko thread. And then when I've done that, the block will almost be done, because this is, this is what the block's made of. So let me just show you how that's getting on. Do you see that? There's not very much change in thread yet. Actually, see, I have a stitch there that's very off. I don't like that, so I'm actually going to pull that out and do that again. So while I'm unpicking that, I guess you're not getting to see very much of the Sashiko I've done, but nevertheless, I'll continue on and sew this around, and I'll come back and show you how it's getting on. The Sashiko on this is done, so I'm going to put this up onto the design wall. So I'm just hand holding this, so I hope it's steady enough for you to see. So that is row 3 and 4. If I go up, you can see these other blocks that I've already done. And you also might see I've made a little bit of a change on this wall. So I've added an extra row of the more denim-y colours. I'm going to see if I can back off a little bit to give you a better view. And then the pale, very pale blue is on the bottom, and I haven't done any Sashiko at all down there. Now over here on this side, I have a long length, and I just have it pinned up to show you. I've actually sewn all those squares together, and this is actually the very bottom row. So when it goes down here, I just don't have room at the bottom to hang it. There'll be this very pale blue row, and then the dark goes along the very bottom. And I've sewn it together because this row basically is just a couple of long rows of Sashiko stitching, and so I want those to be in a straight line, so I didn't want to not quite measure right, and if I did a Sashiko stitch here and then the next one started down here, this way I can just draw a ruler line all the way along and put some Sashiko along there. So I'm probably not going to show that on camera. It's just a straight line of Sashiko stitching that anybody can do. So those are the changes that I've made. And obviously this is just what I'm doing. If you're doing something similar, you can arrange these colours and blocks and do whatever circles that you want to do. I've actually redone some of the Sashiko on this block. I decided that when I put it up on the wall, the variegated thread was not enough contrast. This outer area I've now unpicked and changed it to navy blue, and then I've also added these little petals in between the larger petals, just to give the whole thing more definition. I think I'm happier with that now, so I'm going to put it back up on my design wall. I have kept the variegated thread in the centre floral section. This is the same pattern that I used on the other piece, chrysanthemum shape. And what I've done is I've drawn this pattern onto some heat and bond, and I'm going to do 3 of these shapes in different sizes. So I've drawn them on there. I'm going to use this square as the background, and then I'm going to use 3 of the darker blues and arrange them on this square. So I'm just going to take these to the iron and fuse these to the back of my darker squares here. So I've fused these shapes onto here, and now I'm just going to cut out around the lines. I'm going to be quite careful here with this. Okay, I'm going to cut all 3 the same, and I'm just going to peel this paper off the back. And then I'm going to arrange all these 3 onto this square the way that I want them. So I've laid these on here and moved them around a little bit, and this is the layout that I'm going to do. I just have to trim a little bit off there. I'm just going to put a couple of pins in these to hold them in place. I haven't fused them yet because what I want to do is just, some of this fabric is laying underneath, and I'm just going to trim some of this off so there isn't lots of layers fused on top of each other. I am going to leave them to overlap slightly. I just want to be careful that when I lift these, I don't trim off so much that I see the pale blue fabric on the underneath. Okay, so I'm just going to get some smaller, sharper scissors to do this. If I carefully fold this back, I can see that I can trim that much off there. Okay. And then over here, I can just trim a little bit of that off. So I'm just going to work around here, just trimming off all these little bits that are laying underneath. And once I've done that, I'll fuse this into place. I've fused these on, and I've done some applique, machine applique around the edges. And I didn't show that again because I showed it earlier in the same video. And I've begun doing the Sashiko. So I'm just finishing off this drawing that I did. I used the same pattern again, and I just drew an outline of this shape to put an added row in there, piece of interest. And then I've also, I'm not sure if you can see on camera, but I'm also doing one on this pail as an extra one. But I'm actually going to outline that one in the navy blue. The white shows up well against this darker blue areas. But you can see I've actually done a white row on the pail around the outside of this, and it doesn't show up that well. Because of where it is, the position of that, I'm okay with that. But for this one over here, I do want it to show up as an outline. I'm going to go ahead and finish this Sashiko, and then this part, this block will be finished. This block is done now. I've finished the Sashiko around there. I don't think I mentioned that while I was doing this applique part, I did do tension control on here. I know I always talk about tension control. In this particular area though, it probably didn't make any difference as far as tension goes, but that rubbing the finger over the stitches that I always talk about, it does help the Sashiko thread to plump up, so I still continued to do it. And over here I just did all the tension as normal. So I'm going to put these two up on the wall and then move on to the next area. Now, I was planning on using the same shape for a third block, but I'm still kind of trying to stick to the basic idea. Maybe a couple of small chrysanthemums, not quite decided. When I make them, it'll be exactly the same process as this, so I'm probably not going to show it on camera, but I will at some point show that third block. Check back for more blocks in the future.